How's it going, everyone? As you probably would have heard recently, there was an article in The Guardian, and it was just discussing the welfare crackdown on single parents that the federal Liberal government has been doing. Basically, what this crackdown is that it enforces single parents to prove that they're actually single and actually they're not in a relationship. This is to ensure that they're not flouting the rules or breaking the rules when it comes to welfare benefits and stuff like that. Now, it was expected that 4% of the 370,000 single parents were apparently breaking the rules. Now, with this review, it was only actually 1.3% of the 370,000 people who were breaking the rules. This only constitutes 950 people out of 370,000 people. It's just an example of the government just unfairly targeting the most vulnerable in our community and basically just trying to put the boot on the face of people who need support but have to go through a huge bureaucratic process just to get that support. As you probably know, if you've ever experienced going through Centrelink in Australia, you probably would know how it feels to wait in line for maybe an hour or 30 minutes just to get served, and how it feels to get you filling out a new start, because it takes like a month just to process all that type of information. Now imagine if you had to do this every single week. Improve to Centrelink that you were not breaking the rules of this welfare program and ensuring that you had all your documentation ready and stuff like that, just to deal with a department that's so understaffed and so underfunded that most of the time they are so overworked they just don't care about the outcome of a case. I'm not saying the people down there don't care, but I'm saying that because they're so overworked and got so much work to do, you kind of have to just grow numb at the suffering of our most vulnerable in society. With this report, it kind of exemplifies a wider problem with the Liberal Party pretty much and their policies towards alleviating, well, quote unquote, alleviating our most vulnerable in the community. Another example of how the Liberal Party in Australia tries to target the working class in Australia is for robo-debt. If you've been following the news recently, or maybe in the past few months, you probably would have heard about how the federal court found that robo-debt was actually unlawful and actually violated the human rights of people around the country. You may have also heard about the class action that Bill Shorten recently announced to represent a lot of people affected by this issue, where if you don't know much about it, I'll explain it to you. So basically, it's a debt that is given to you by Centrelink to say that you have this debt that you owed to the government and you must pay it off in this certain amount of time. The only issue with this was that it was done robotically and automatically, so basically over 70% of these robo-debts needed to be reviewed, and over 220,000 of these robo-debts probably required funding or probably had to be waived. So a lot of these people didn't realize when they give these debts, they trust that the government is doing it in a reasonable manner. But of course, some of these people don't even owe a debt to the government. With this, it also impacted mental health. There was an article in the Saturday paper which talked about there was 5 families that talked about how a family member of them had committed suicide. Robo-debt had contributed to their suicide. This type of targeting vulnerable people and like targeting the people that need help the most with this sham of a debt program is an example of how the Liberal Party just doesn't give a shit about people at the low end of the income scale. The fact that people's mental health was considerably impacted by this shows that the government had no foresight to realize, maybe we shouldn't do this because there's probably people out there who are going through a lot of stress through their life and actually need some alleviation from that stress and need some help from the government, instead of giving them a freaking debt that isn't even their debt that they have to pay off. It's just a way for the government to basically attack our most vulnerable in the community while cutting welfare payments to people such as single parents, like I was talking about before, cutting their payments because apparently they were quote unquote breaking the rules. Now, of course, people's situations are a lot more complex than that, and the fact of the matter is that the Liberal Party has always been a party that has targeted the most vulnerable in our community, but also has given massive tax breaks to the ultra wealthy in Australia, given massive subsidies to like industries in Australia that shouldn't be subsidized, like the coal industry and the fossil fuel industry, while also allowing multinational companies to completely tax dodge their way out of paying tax to the Australian government and the Australian public, but yet they seem to be able to attack our most vulnerable in our community. There's also other programs such as Work for the Dole and the Job Active Scheme, which was introduced in 1996 but also reintroduced by the Abbott government in 2015 or 14, I believe. What Work for the Dole is that you do volunteering or you do some sort of employment activities to build up your skills so you can get a social security benefit in return. Now, over 19% of participants who participated in the Work for the Dole scheme only found a permanent job after participating in the program. So it's only helping 1 in 5 people who are actually involved in the program. Then there's also the fact that it only improves the probability of a person getting a job by just 2 percentage points. Keep in mind that this program costs $1 billion to operate, and yet it only improves the likelihood of getting a job by 2 percentage points. So it's obvious that this program is just basically useless. It's just we're funneling money into a program that has no economic benefit to people who need a job, and it threatens people's ability to live, because if you don't demonstrate that you are trying to find a job under that scheme, you can lose your benefit. You can lose your welfare benefit. You can lose your welfare payment. And the problem with being under this type of scheme is that you don't have a union behind you to protect you when you're volunteering for these type of employers. So some of these employers can easily exploit you pretty much and just, leave you to the scrap heap when it comes to, giving proper labor rights to their workers. So because of that reason, the scheme basically just exploits unemployed people and allows them to be attacked by their employers and be exploited by the government to be forced into these type of volunteer jobs that don't really result into an actual job at the end of it. Now, the reasoning why Work for the Dole was introduced was because normal working Australians pay their taxes and to support the unemployed. Our general idea is that it's expected for unemployed people to basically reciprocate and give something back to the community in return for a social security benefit. However, when you make this type of argument, governments have an implicit responsibility in that case to make the available jobs for unemployed people so they can actually get a job. There's over 2 million people who are either unemployed or underemployed. And out of that 2 million people, you have only around 150 to 200,000 jobs available around the country. And so when you think about it, there is not enough jobs for everyone in the country. What do you do with the rest of the people who can't find a job? This idea that you have to reciprocate and give back to your community and build some skills so you can get a job later on, it's just ridiculous. Not everyone in a capitalist system is going to be employed. There's always going to be people out there who are unemployed and just don't have the means necessary to get a job. There's no capitalist system in the world where there is a 0% unemployment rate. So this idea that people are meant to get a job when the jobs aren't there for them to get it's ridiculous, really. There's also the fact that because jobs aren't promoted by the government to be available to them, what can you really expect them to do? Then there's also the fact that the Liberal Party has always had an attitude to those who cannot find work, and this attitude is just basically that the unemployed are lazy, disorganized, have a poor work ethic, or have other family personal deficits of their own that they need to work on. This is pretty prominent in the mainstream media as well, mainly because the mainstream media is just controlled by a bunch of wealthy corporate hacks which don't actually advance the interests of the general population, but manufacture the consent of the population to believe that the Liberal Party are apparently good economic managers when in reality they're not. Anyway, I digress. But the problem with this arrogant view that the unemployed people who are just, poor, organized, disorganized, and just have a poor work ethic, it's just ludicrous. It's just you're basically saying, let's not look at the root causes of the problem. Let's just blame these people for their personal issues instead of looking at the root cause of the problem. Now, obviously, the root cause of the problem is that ever since the 1980s, Australia has become a lot more neoliberal, so it's become a lot more globalized, and there's just been a lot more exploitation of unskilled and semi-skilled labor to third world countries, pretty much. And there's just been also the fact that automation's also coming in as well. That's also taken up a lot of unskilled labor type jobs as well. When you look at the 1970s, for example, our parents back then, the jobs they got when they left school around year 10, they would have been very unskilled labor type jobs. These days, that's not reality. Unskilled labor jobs are just not prominent anymore, and they're becoming more and more less influential in society. So when you have that issue, this idea that young people are meant to be expected to just get a job and the skills required, it's ludicrous, really, because there's just no jobs for them to actually get. And you can't expect a young worker, a young person or older unemployed person to get a job when those jobs are not really available to everyone. There's also the fact that because of globalization, younger workers can't find an unskilled job as easily as it used to be. The mainstream media likes to peddle the dole bludger myth a lot, even though dole bludgers don't really exist. You can't even survive on a dole. You can't even survive on freaking Noosta anyway, so I don't see how that can be a reality for people, but this is something that's been peddled in the mainstream media quite a bit, and it's just going to be continued to be, because it's a way for the working class to be distracted at the real issues of what's causing their problems, such as, the billionaire class and the people at the top of society who hoard all the wealth and pay no tax at all, and blame just your normal working Joe who's just trying to find a job where there's no jobs available. Like, you have multiple companies that pay no tax. You have a government that subsidizes multiple industries that we no longer should be subsidizing, such as the fossil fuel industry. And then you also have the Liberal government also giving massive tax cuts to the rich while targeting our most poorest in society and saying that these people should be left on their own to support themselves when they don't have the money to do so. The Liberal Party has always been a party of the wealthy elite, and they've always been a party that will support giving government money to the wealthiest in society while attacking those at the very bottom of the working class. And basically, that's why the Liberal Party has always been a force for the billionaire class, and has always been an organization that's just absolutely bankrupt of an actual ideology and just follows the will of their donors. They basically give socialism to the rich, pretty much, and then just give government money to people who don't deserve it, and give tax breaks and allow multinational companies not to pay any tax at all to the public system and influence our government. Because of that, the Liberal Party has always been a party of pieces of shit that don't care about the working class or don't care about normal working people, but would rather just line up their own pockets with the money that they receive from their corporate donors and line up their pockets with taxpayer money.